Hey everyone, we're going to take a look at the respiratory system some more. In other videos we looked at the upper respiratory system and we looked at the larynx, but now we're moving on to the trachea, the bronchi, bronchioles, and the alveoli of the lungs, as well as the protective tissues. All right, so let's start with the trachea. So the trachea, let's orient ourselves. Here's an anterior view. This is the end of the larynx, and then here's the beginning of the trachea. It's hiding under here, under the thyroid gland. You can see the trachea a bit right there. The cricoid cartilage. The cricoid cartilage is right here. That's part of the larynx, so the trachea begins right here, the more evenly shaped tube. These are tracheal rings. They're hyaline cartilage. We want to make sure our trachea is nice and propped open. They're not full rings. If you look on the back side, it ends. Those rings end. So it's not a full ring. But the tracheal cartilage does wrap around, makes a C shape to protect this anterior portion of the trachea, which is more exposed on the anterior side. You can see that here as well. Here is the cricoid cartilage, thyroid cartilage, cricoid cartilage, thyroid gland. Here's the trachea, and you can see the rings. You can take this piece out. You can see that, yeah, it ends in the back, but you've got rings, these rings that stop towards the posterior side. All right, when we breathe air in, it goes down our larynx, trachea, which is our largest airway leading to the lungs. And then you can see we got two lungs, of course. We got a right lung and we got a left lung. Heart's here too. I'm going to remove that. We then get to a branching point. To get to the right lung or the left lung, we have to make a decision. Are we going to the right primary bronchus or the left primary bronchus? So right primary bronchus, left primary bronchus. They might seem the same, but there are some key differences here. First, remember that heart? That heart is taking up a lot of space. And of course the lung has to adapt. And the heart is sitting a little more to the left side. So there's a more prominent cardiac notch. This is called a cardiac notch, this space, this curve on the left side to make room for that heart. Because of that, this left lung is smaller. And because of that, there's only two lobes on the left side. You've got a superior lobe and an inferior lobe. Superior and inferior. Well, on the right side, you've got a superior, a middle, and an inferior. Superior, middle, inferior. 3 lobes on the right. It's a bigger lung than on the left. Because of that, let's take a look at those primary bronchi again. This right primary bronchus will need to extend farther, at an angle farther down than on the left. So it's not shown that prominently here. Let me show you a different example. The angle of this primary bronchus is steeper than on the left. It's more likely that you'll aspirate. That's when you get solid things in your respiratory tract. It's more likely that you'll aspirate things, choke on things, get stuff stuck in your lungs, going to the right than on the left because of this angle. It's more likely on the right side. Got more lobes, it's bigger, so you have a steeper decline for the primary bronchus. Oh, and by the way, that decision point, that's called a carina, C-A-R-I-N-A. This decision point, the branching, that's called the carina. Right primary bronchus is steeper, left primary bronchus is not as steep because you've only got two lobes to go to. The bronchi is what officially enters the lungs. You can see the secondary bronchi that are going in here. Secondary bronchi going in. This region where you have the bronchi and blood vessels entering and exiting, this is known as a hilum. There are hilums in other organs like our kidney where you have entry and exit of vessels and the ureter. But here for the lung, this is the hilum. This little entry point, you can see that over here too. That would be the hilum on either side. This is the hilum. If you ever see red blood vessels in the pulmonary area, in the lung area, red means it's oxygenated, which means it's already gone to the lung. So red would be a pulmonary artery. This is a lung lobule. Red would be a pulmonary... Did I say that right? No, I said that wrong. Red would be a pulmonary vein. It's going back to the heart. Red is a pulmonary vein. It's been oxygenated from the lung, so it's going back to the heart. Red is a pulmonary vein, pulmonary vein. Blue is a pulmonary artery because it's going from the right ventricle to the pulmonary trunk, then branching to pulmonary arteries to get oxygenated. It's reverse in the pulmonary system. If it's blue, it's a pulmonary artery. If it's red, it's a pulmonary vein returning blood to the left atrium. So that's the hilum. We then get branches here. You can see that there are 3 branches on the right side. Remember, there are 3 lobes, superior, middle, and inferior. Here's the superior secondary bronchus, middle secondary bronchus, inferior secondary bronchus. There are 3 secondary bronchi on the right side, but there's only 2 on the left because you only have 2 lobes, superior and inferior. Superior, middle, inferior, superior, inferior, secondary bronchi. They branch again, and that's when you get your tertiary bronchi. There's a lot more. We're not going to go over how many there are in that detail, but it's going to branch more and more and more. After the bronchi, we get even smaller branches. Those are bronchioles. This is a zoomed in version of the lung. We get to bronchioles. Bronchioles are also protected by cartilage and lined with smooth muscle, so you can change the size. You can bronchodilate, bronchoconstrict. Bronchodilation, that's a sympathetic response because you need more air in a fight or flight response. Bronchoconstriction, that's a parasympathetic response because when you're relaxed, you don't need as much air and you want to limit exposure to particles and stuff in the air. The bronchioles will continue branching smaller and smaller from terminal bronchioles to respiratory bronchioles until we get to alveolar ducts. Alveolar ducts are the airways that lead into these air sacs. These are the alveolar sacs. So all these little spherical things, those are alveoli. They're all these airways are interconnected. So all these alveoli are interconnected through these alveolar ducts. And these are just air spaces. Most of the alveoli are made of type 1 alveolar cells. They're simple squamous, and you want them to be thin and flat so that you have high exchange of gases with these pulmonary capillaries. You want lots of exchange with the pulmonary capillaries. So you want it to be as thin as possible. But there's also other cells that you can find. They're mostly type 1, but the other cell type you can find is type 2 alveolar cells, and those produce something called a chemical class called surfactant. Soap is a surfactant. What it does is it acts at the surface. It's a surface acting agent, surfactant, and it helps reduce surface tension. Helps reduce surface tension so that you're equalizing pressure in your lungs. It's a little bit of a physics thing there. Think of it as like if you ever have a balloon and you try rubbing, like an empty balloon, and you try rubbing the balloon together in your fingertips. It's really hard, but if you put soap inside of it, it's easy to move back and forth like that. You want that kind of reduced tension in your lungs so that it's easier to inflate. It'll be easier to inflate if you have that. Right. Getting down to these lung lobules, you can see that, so this is just a chunk of a lung. What's surrounding the lung? That would be pleural membrane. Directly surrounding the lung is visceral pleural membrane, visceral pleura. If it were against the thoracic cavity, that would be parietal pleural membrane, against the thoracic cavity. We also want to minimize the amount of we want to minimize the amount of interstitial fluid that's surrounding the alveoli because we want to make that distance between the capillaries and the alveoli very, very small. So there's actually a lot of lymph vessels in this area. So this is representing a larger lymph vessel, but there are lots of lymph capillaries to absorb fluid and minimize interstitial fluid. The lung is shaped the way it is, again, because of the heart. You can see the cardiac notch right here. And then because of the diaphragm is sitting right here. You can see how the diaphragm is sitting right here. Cardiac notch, and then room for the diaphragm. When the diaphragm contracts, it flattens out. So this is a diaphragm at rest. This is a diaphragm at rest. Last thing, just when we're referring to the lung, because the lung is pointier on top, we call this the apex and this the base, which makes sense. Apex on top, base on bottom. When we're talking about the heart, because it's pointier on bottom, this is the apex, this is base. So it's flipped for the heart because where it's pointy. Apex, base, on the superior side, apex, base. All right, I think that's it. Thanks for watching. Please let me know if you have any questions.